When I was younger, when I was just a girl with pigtails and knees that were always covered in abrasions from cycling and falling, I didn't fully understand why everything in our family was arranged the way it was, and not otherwise, why there was always a strange, disturbing coolness between us, who seemed so close, as if someone I opened the window in winter and forgot to close it. But there was one moment, the only one that stuck in my memory with such acuteness that I can still remember what I was wearing that day, how the room smelled, how the door creaked, and how her words hit, words after which it was as if my whole reality cracked like an old mirror, accidentally fell on the tile. We were standing in the kitchen. The light was harsh in the morning, and Mom seemed to be just saying something out loud, as if she were talking about the weather or milk prices, but her voice suddenly turned cold and glassy. If I had known about your developmental disorder, you wouldn't be here. You were an extra presence in our family. I didn't even understand what she said right away. The words seemed to pass by, but then, like an echo, they returned and hit harder than any sound. My heart skipped a beat. My chest felt empty. The world went dark, as if someone had turned off the lights not only in the room, but also in me. I stopped breathing, for a moment, but long enough to feel everything I believed in crumble. Those words weighed on me, which I carried through the years like a worn-out, battered suitcase that you should have gotten rid of long ago, but you're still dragging it with you because it's a part of you. Soon after that, as I now understand, it was no longer by chance, but probably everything had been planned for a long time. We found ourselves in front of my grandparents' house. It stood empty, old, with peeling paint and blank windows, as if it had long since run out of steam along with everyone who once laughed in its rooms. There were 3 of us, me, Mom, and Dad. And then, right out of the car window, my father stuck his head out, looked at me as if I were not his daughter, but someone else's, a random girl, and said, "Ed, let's start over. A new life begins for the 3 of us." He said it loudly, almost solemnly, and I remember my mom nodding, even smiling, as if they were going on vacation instead of doing something that would change my life forever. And then they left. The car turned around, I saw the headlights flashing, and they laughed, yes, they laughed, as they drove away, leaving me standing alone on the side of the road, frozen, unable to move. I was 9. 9 years old is the age when children still believe that parents know everything, that Mom is always there, that Dad is strong and kind. And I just stood there, watching their car drive off into the distance, and I knew with all my skin, with all my body, that they wouldn't be coming back. My name is Grace. I'm 24 now, but every time I think about that moment, I turn back into that girl with trembling hands and empty eyes. I have a twin brother, Daniel. We grew up together, shared a room, toys, time with our parents, but we haven't lived together for over 9 years. Because what happened then split not only my heart, but also our family. The reason, of course, is in the past, the common past, which does not go away, is not forgotten, no matter how old you become. We weren't a special family. My father worked in the office, my mother worked part-time, and the rest of the time was cleaning, cooking, and taking care of us. Everything looked simple, almost ordinary, until school started. It was then that it became clear who in the family would become the sun and who would become the shadow. Daniel turned out to be gifted. Everything was easy for him, math, reading, memorizing dates. The teachers never tired of admiring him. "You're amazing, Daniel. Great job again. So smart, so promising," they said, and Mom beamed as if she was the one getting the A's. My father joked that he would make a scientist or a doctor, and most importantly, he would never know what poverty was. He was their pride. He was their future. What about me? I was just there. It's always been difficult for me to concentrate. In class, I was annoyed by the sounds of someone moving a chair, clicking a pencil. I couldn't think, couldn't study, couldn't explain what was going on. The teachers scolded me, asked me to be more attentive, and then they just stopped noticing. His parents devoted more and more time to Daniel, his favorite food, trips, gifts, and attention. Everything is for him. And I was left on my own. Abandoned not physically, but in that terrible sense when no one sees you, even if you scream. If there had been someone who would have heard me, who would have just sat down next to me and said, "I see you, I'm listening," maybe it would have been different. But I couldn't. It was hard for me to speak. Not in the sense that I was silent, I just couldn't find the words to explain what was happening to me. Even now, as an adult, I'm still learning to express myself. Sometimes I think I'm saying one thing, but it comes out completely different, ridiculous, out of place. I try. I'm really trying. I've gotten better, but the struggle doesn't stop. And that's all my mom would say to that. I was born with a mild developmental disorder, and although many things were not given to me immediately, although I sometimes went against the expectations of others, I still grew up, absorbing the world in my own way, trying to learn, do better, understand people and myself, step by step, slowly but persistently. Yes, I faced difficulties that others didn't even think about, and sometimes I felt how different I was, not outwardly, no, but inwardly, as if my mind was half a step behind everyone else, as if I heard and felt everything a little differently. But that didn't make me unworthy. That didn't mean I could be ignored. I was still a child, alive, growing, looking for love, and not a shadow in the corner that is noticed only when it gets in the way. But my parents looked at me differently. It was as if they had decided from the very beginning that I was not the child they wanted. They didn't scream, they didn't hit, they didn't make a scene, no, everything was much quieter, much more subtle and scary, a half-frowned look full of disappointment, words spoken listlessly, as if with effort, endless comparisons with Daniel, in which I always found myself losing. "Daniel's doing great," Mom would say as she walked past me, as if I were not a person, but furniture that she had bumped into lightly. Her father chuckled, nodding approvingly, as if confirming that Grace would never be like him. I could probably stand up for myself. To try. To shout, to demand, to explain, to beg. But a child cannot argue with a parent when the whole world in your family is arranged as a clear hierarchy, where you are at the lowest level, where your word means nothing. I was silent. She smiled when it hurt. She swallowed resentment like water, even when it was a lump in her throat. As I got older, even my bond with Daniel, the same twin with whom we once built houses out of pillows and secretly ate cookies under the covers, began to break down. When we were kids, we were next to each other. He held my hand in dark corridors and laughed at our jokes, which only we understood. But then he drifted away. It was as if someone had built a wall of bricks between us, and every day he added one, looking away, not noticing, not responding. At school, he pretended he didn't know me. "It's a good thing we don't look alike," he once said, adjusting the collar of his shirt. "I wouldn't want anyone to think we're related." Those words stuck into me like an ice hook. I felt something inside freeze, but as always, I didn't say a word. He began to ignore me completely, and the kindness that had once bound us crumbled like sugar soaked in the rain. Our parents didn't notice. Or rather, they didn't want to notice. They didn't care. Not only did they not pay attention to how Daniel treated me, they stopped seeing me altogether. I became like furniture, a silent part of the interior. They stopped asking me about anything. They weren't interested in my feelings, desires, thoughts. I was just there. Somewhere nearby. No color, no shape. Now that I think back on it, I realize how much that past shaped me. It wasn't just a difficult childhood, it was a system in which I learned to be invisible in order to survive. But I'm still learning. Every year I gain more and more of my right to be in life. Despite everything that happened, despite the silence in which I lived, despite the fact that I was underestimated, neglected, ignored, I came to the conclusion that I no longer agreed to be a background character. I'm not a statistician. I am not an addition to someone's biography. I am the author of my life. I'm Grace. And I'm starting to write a new chapter. But to be honest, most of my life has been about waiting. I lived in an endless mode of hope. What if someone notices? What if today everything will be different? Even days like birthdays or Christmas, when, it would seem, everything should be special, for me they were just regular dates on the calendar. My parents took Daniel to a restaurant. He had gifts, surprises, candles. But I have nothing. No cake, no congratulations. I went to the store and bought myself a pre-packaged salad with a discount. I sat in the kitchen, looking out the window, and imagined that somewhere out there, beyond this horizon, there was a place where they were waiting for me. It was the same on New Year's Eve. Cheerful laughter booming from the living room, firecrackers, the clink of glasses, the sounds of fireworks outside the window. My father told me, "Grace, go to your room. I can't concentrate when you're around." I was sitting in my room, eating plastic-wrapped chips, listening to someone else's party, and feeling the distance between me and everyone else only grow. And it got even worse with my studies. They didn't buy me textbooks. "You don't need it," my father said. "You can't do anything anyway." He pronounced these words indifferently, almost lazily, as if he were talking about the weather. And Daniel was given a corner, a new table was put up, and everything he needed was bought. I had no choice but to give up. Without support, without faith, without a chance. My grades were sliding downhill like a stone, and I lost all motivation. It seemed like there was no place left in the world where I could feel needed. Not at home, not at school. Only two adults looked at me differently, Grandma and Grandpa. They lived far away, more than 4 hours away, and I couldn't see them often. But twice a year, in the summer and on vacation, I was allowed to go to them. However, there was one rule: I had no right to speak. Their house was located far from the city, in a real rural hinterland, where there was no noise of cars, no neon signs, no endless hubbub of streets, just endless fields, slightly hilly, with trees curving along the horizon, and a soft wind that rustled the grass as if it were talking to the sky. My parents and brother found this place boring. They curled their lips when cows or old barns flashed by the window, frowned when the phone signal disappeared, and said that it was even hard to breathe with longing, but for me this corner of the earth was a real paradise. Here, away from parental contempt, amidst the rustle of leaves and the singing of birds, I felt lighter, freer, needed, even if only for a short time, but for real. While Daniel was diligently cramming something out of school textbooks, shutting himself off from me with a wall of silent superiority, I sat on the porch with a box of colored pencils and drew everything I saw: the sun's rays falling on an old wattle fence, a butterfly perched on a dandelion, a thin blue shadow from a tree growing by the barn. I didn't know how to draw technically correctly, my lines were crooked, the colors mixed clumsily, but I tried my best, because it was my way of speaking, expressing what was inside. But instead of understanding, I heard my brother's grin, who looked at my drawings over the top of the book and said, "Seriously? Is it your Calyx again?" My parents looked at my scraps of paper as if I had brought them something dirty. Mom wrinkled her nose, Dad just grunted, saying fleetingly, "You better concentrate on something useful." Only Grandma and Grandpa were different. They didn't just look, they saw. They saw my attempts, my desire to be heard, even if I couldn't find the words. They carefully hung my simple drawings on the door of the old refrigerator, as if they were paintings by great artists, and Grandma said, "Just look at the sunset. It feels like I painted the sky myself." At that moment, I felt warm, not because I thought my work was outstanding, but because someone finally saw me for real. Yes, they loved Daniel too, and he went to them, just like me, but they never opposed us, did not divide us into the best and the loser. They just loved, equally, without conditions. These rare trips became my salvation, an emotional refuge, an oasis in which I could breathe deeply and not be afraid that I would become unnecessary again. When we turned 9, right before spring break, our parents broke the news to us, which seemed to shift the ground under our feet. We had just returned from school, and as soon as I put my backpack by the door, my father spoke in a sharp, businesslike voice: "We sold the apartment." I stood with my mouth open, not fully understanding what that meant. Daniel, grinning, said, "Are you really stupid? We live in a different place now. We're going to have a new life, not like this squalor." Confused, I tried to make sense of it. If the apartment was sold, then where would we live now? And the school? And my things? But my questions were met with annoyance. "Shut up," his father snapped. "You're never any good. Even your questions are meaningless." He sounded like I'd messed up something again. He didn't even give me a chance to understand, let alone express his feelings. Everything, as always, was decided without me. Pack your things quickly. We've been preparing for this for a long time. I looked around, and only then did I realize how isolated I was in my room. The living room was almost empty. The books had disappeared from the shelves, the curtains had been removed, and the furniture was wrapped in foil. All this was happening before my eyes, but outside my world. I held back my tears, trying to look calm. In a panic, I packed my things, school supplies, a couple of toys, some clothes, all the little things that were only mine. The rest, it seemed to me, no longer mattered. All that was left was to put the little pieces of my already fragmented life in boxes. I was standing by the door with my backpack, and I said softly, "I'm ready." My father didn't even look at me. He just grabbed my box and threw it into the trunk like it wasn't worth anything. And everything in me shrank, the box, my childhood life, my drawings, my memories, as if they were all thrown away in one motion. I got into the car, clutching my backpack tightly, feeling my stomach tremble. Something was wrong. Daniel, who usually sat next to me, whom I was still looking for, was gone. I asked, my voice shaking, and it felt like I was asking the wrong question. It should be the four of us. Mom turned over her shoulder and gave me a look that burned like a slap in the face. "Shut up. You should be quiet in the car." I was speechless. My lips were trembling, but I didn't dare say anything. Then, with a touch of annoyance, she added, "You're hard to understand. We gave your brother some money and let him go out and play. That's it. Be quiet if you understand." I didn't know what to think. It became stuffy and cramped in the car, even though there were only 3 of us. I stared out the window, trying to breathe evenly. Behind the glass, trees flashed by, blooming with the flowers of spring, bright and lively, like my drawings, the ones that hung on my grandmother's refrigerator. And suddenly, a small, almost weightless spark of hope flared up in my heart. What if everything was wrong? What if, like before, when they took only Daniel, now they're taking only me? Maybe this is their strange but unexpected way of making a surprise, to show that I'm worth something, that I deserve a new life. I smiled to myself, as if a small warm firefly had blossomed inside, and excitement rose in my chest, filling me with some kind of childish, naive delight, as if finally, after so many years, I was also noticed, chosen, included in a circle that always seemed unattainable to me. My parents were talking quietly to each other, but I wasn't listening. Their voices, usually so heavy to my ears, seemed distant and unimportant this time. I was too absorbed in the thought that maybe my moment had finally arrived, that this journey we had so suddenly embarked on would become something special for me, something that would show that I was important too. I don't remember exactly how I fell asleep. Perhaps the road made me sick, perhaps my eyes closed by themselves from excitement and fatigue. All I remember is suddenly waking up to the sound of my mother's loud, harsh voice, "Wake up. Take your school bag and get out of the car." I got up, still sleepy, disoriented, as if I'd been pulled out of a dream without preparation. She opened the door, went out, and froze. My heart, which had just begun to hope, froze. We were standing in front of my grandparents' house. The house I loved so much, the house where it smelled of cinnamon and sunshine, where my drawings hung on the refrigerator and where I was seen, albeit briefly, but really. Hurrah! Grandma! Grandpa! I shouted, joy surged from within, and I rushed to the door, not doubting that now I would be hugged, invited into the house, offered cocoa. But when I pulled the handle, the door wouldn't budge. I pulled again. To no avail. The door was locked. "Mom, I can't go in," I said, turning around, confused. Mom stood there as if it was an ordinary moment. "It's a weekday," she said with a slight grin, not looking at me. "They're probably still at work. I just called them. They'll be here soon. See you later." She grabbed my luggage and unceremoniously dumped it in front of the door without even looking at me. I stared at her in shock, trying to figure out what was going on. "Wait, where are you going?" I asked, and my voice was getting quieter by the second, but panic was growing inside. "Mom? Dad? Where are you going? I almost screamed, pleadingly, desperately. But she just waved me away, as if I were a fly preventing her from closing the car door. Your brother went to a prestigious private elementary school, she said, finally deigning to reply, but her voice was as cold as ice. This guarantees him success in every class. He is already preparing to transfer next semester. We sold the apartment to pay for his education. We're moving into a new house. For him. I stood with my mouth open and couldn't believe what I was hearing. But I tried to say something. You're distracting him, Mom continued. You're creating additional costs. The food, the clothes, it's all because of you. You'll be better off here. This is your chance. Stay with Grandma and Grandpa. I felt like everything inside was collapsing. I didn't understand. I couldn't make sense of it. Wait, what's going on? Am I changing schools? Am I going to another school? Questions whirled in my head, knocking out my breath. Mom turned to me, and in her eyes there was an expression that I will remember for the rest of my life. Tired disgust, without a drop of warmth. That's exactly what annoys me about you, she said, raising her voice. You're always making me uncomfortable. You're a burden. Your grades are terrible. His appearance is below average. And you can't even speak properly. Daniel is a wonderful kid. And you're making things difficult. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even blink. Everything froze. The only thing pounding in my chest was the pain. Did I do something wrong? I gasped, almost soundlessly. If so, then I'm sorry. Mom snorted. I don't need your apologies. These are empty words. If I had known about your violation, would not have given birth to you. You are not needed. You are a burden to us all. And everything. In that second, the world disappeared. The sound, the light, the weight of her body, everything dissolved into silence, filled with the echo of her words. I stood like a marble statue, unable to move. My father leaned out of the car window. His voice was final, like a verdict. We're leaving. A new life begins for the three of us. That's all said. It's all settled. I tried to stop them, rushed to the car, held out my hands. Don't go, please, Mom, Dad. I'm really trying. Am I really that bad? I gasped, but the words still sounded quiet, as if no one had heard me anymore. My thoughts were confused, and I couldn't find a single sentence that would express everything I was feeling. I just wanted them to stay. So that someone, at least someone, would stay. Mom looked at me coldly, with the same expression I already knew. Sorry to keep you waiting, she told her father, climbing back into the car. Since we're here, we'll stop by the bakery and buy a cake. We'll take you home to Daniel. You can eat it with him. All I could do then was stand there by the old porch, alone in the evening wind, watching the departing car, which didn't even flicker its brake lights, didn't slow down for a moment, as if their 9-year-old daughter, the child they hadn't bothered to leave, wasn't outside its windows. Even say goodbye. I watched as the taillights slowly faded into the darkness until they disappeared completely, leaving only dust and trembling in my legs. I couldn't move. I couldn't think or breathe. All that was left in me was an emptiness stretching from my throat to my stomach, heavy as lead. And suddenly, in this unbearable silence, I heard a voice. Soft. Good. Truly native. Grace, are you all right? Came a voice from behind me, and I turned around. My grandparents were standing in front of me. Their faces, always so lively, were now full of anxiety and confusion. Grandma immediately took a step towards me, her eyes darting over my face, as if looking for at least one sign that I was okay. And Grandpa frowned the way he did when someone broke something important that he had been fixing for hours, but now something else was broken. By that time, it was completely dark, and only moonlight illuminated the wooden veranda on which I stood with my backpack clutched to my chest. The world around me has become alien and empty again. They left me. They left it like a forgotten suitcase on the side of the road, like an old unwanted doll that had lost an eye. But when I looked into my grandparents' eyes, warm, worried, filled with care, I suddenly felt that despite the betrayal, despite the pain, there was someone who still sees me. Someone who cares about me. It was a small, almost invisible consolation, but it saved me from breaking down completely. While I was waiting for them to return, I must have fallen asleep, right there, sitting on the porch, clutching my school bag. I don't remember how it happened, but I remember feeling exhausted, as if my body had stopped listening and my heart was beating too slowly. When Grandpa got closer, he immediately noticed, "My hands are like ice, and my face is completely white," he said, carefully wrapping me in his knitted sweater, warm and smelling of mint and wood. He effortlessly lifted me onto his back and carried me into the house, into the very room where I always felt safe. And although I began to feel warmth physically, my mind remained in a thick fog where there was no beginning or end, only pain, disappointment, and a faint, trembling hope that I still existed. Grandma and Grandpa were bustling around the house, talking to each other. Their voices were louder than usual, full not only of alarm, but also of growing indignation. "How long has Grace been waiting here alone?" the grandmother exclaimed, looking at the phone. They had just returned from work, where, as it turned out, they had received a strange, dry message, without apologies, without explanations, just a few words. Grace was left at home. Take care of her. And everything. Without the slightest hint of regret, without any attempt to warn in advance. They immediately dropped everything and went home. And then Grandpa said, almost in a whisper, as if to himself, "If we had stayed longer." I don't even want to think about what could have happened. At that time, my grandfather worked as a foreman at a sawmill, and my grandmother worked in the kitchen at a local snack bar, standing at the stove all day. They were always busy, working from early morning until evening, but even so, my parents didn't bother to contact them in advance. They just dumped responsibility, like an old box with nowhere to put it. And suddenly, all this realization, how little I mean to my parents, how indifferently they got rid of me without thinking about how their daughter felt, covered me like an icy wave. I was sitting on the couch, clutching a mug of hot milk that my grandmother had carefully prepared, and I could feel its warmth creeping inside, into my chest, where before there was only emptiness. And I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They poured in on their own, without warning, hot, desperate. Grandma sat down quietly next to me, put her hand on my back and began to stroke me slowly, as she did when I had nightmares as a child. "Hush, baby, hush," she whispered, and in those simple words there was more love than I had ever heard from my mother in my entire life. Meanwhile, Grandpa abruptly got up, went to the phone and dialed my father's number. The conversation didn't last long, but you could tell from Grandpa's voice that it wasn't an ordinary conversation. At first he spoke calmly, then louder and faster, and for the first time in my life I heard him lose his composure. There was anger, frustration, and pain in his voice, all at once. At some point, he just hung up and stood for a long time, looking out the window, clenching his fists. Then he came back to me, and his voice, when he spoke, became soft again. "Grace." I tried to talk to him. But it seems that dialogue is impossible. He can't hear anyone but himself. He sat down next to me and looked at me. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked quietly, as if he was afraid to scare me even more. The tears continued to roll down my cheeks, but the words didn't want to add up. I tried to explain, to tell everything that had happened, but my voice was breaking, my sentences were breaking, my emotions were interrupting the meaning, and I felt again that everything was going wrong. But Grandma and Grandpa were listening. They sat in silence. They didn't interrupt. They didn't ask any leading questions. They didn't rush it. They were just there. And that was the most important thing. I finally found the strength, through my stifled breathing and confused thoughts, to squeeze out those terrible, prickly words that were still ringing in my ears, as if they had just been uttered. They said that I, an unnecessary being, because I have a developmental disorder. They said it would have been better if I had never been born. Mom and Dad want to start a new life with Daniel, without me. With every phrase that came out of me, I felt all that unbearable weight that I had been carrying inside for so long, trying to hide it under a child's smile, under silence, under obedience. But now that these words were spoken out loud, they became more real, heavier, more painful, as if each syllable was a weight tied to my body. I didn't have time to finish the last sentence, when suddenly my grandmother hugged me tightly, hugging me the way only those who really love do. Her hands were warm and strong, and she whispered, "What are you talking about, honey? You're a wonderful child, no matter what. No matter what others say, you're irreplaceable. We are so happy that you were born." These words tore my heart, but not with pain. On the contrary, they seemed to penetrate inside and began to piece together what had been destroyed so long ago. I sobbed into her shoulder, and she continued to speak, evenly, calmly, as if she were reading me the truth that I should have heard many years ago. The value of a person is not measured by grades, diplomas, or appearance. Your grandfather and I are simple people. We didn't go to prestigious schools, but we lived, did what we loved, and were happy. And you, honey, you don't have to be like anyone else. You may not be good at studying, but you have a rare gift, to feel deeply, to see what others cannot see, to express it. You know how to convey your feelings, even if not through words. It's your gift. And it belongs only to you. I couldn't hold back any longer. The tears that used to be a sign of pain were now flowing with relief. My grandparents showed me something that I had almost forgotten. I do not exist as a shadow, not as a burden, not as a mistake. I am human. I'm important. I'm needed. Grandpa came up to me, put his hand on my head, stroking the way he did when I was a kid when I was afraid of a thunderstorm or a nightmare. "From this day on," he said softly, "there are no more adults here who can make you feel unwanted. You're safe here. And we're sorry that we didn't realize this sooner. You did your best, and we're proud of you." I cried in their arms, letting the feelings overwhelm me completely. But this time it was different. It wasn't desperation. It was cleansing. Their love, their sincerity, their care, all this was the beginning of my healing. From that day on, I stayed with my grandparents. They enrolled me in a local elementary school, a small, cozy one where everyone knew each other by name, where the teachers didn't pass by when the child was silent, but stopped and waited. One of the teachers, Miss Jenny, became the first adult for me, not counting my grandparents, who actually saw me. She didn't demand that I speak quickly, and she didn't get mad if I answered out of place. She was listening. She understood. Since the school was located in a rural area, the classes were small, and the teachers had the opportunity to customize the training for each student. I was given an individual program that allowed me to study at my own pace, without comparing, without rushing. And that changed everything. My grades started to improve. Slowly, hesitantly, but every day I felt my self-esteem growing. I still had difficulty speaking, especially in stressful situations, but I was no longer ashamed of it. I began to realize that my peculiarity is not a weakness. It's just a part of me. I even made friends, real, kind ones, who didn't need to be told why I sometimes shut up. And gradually I began to live a different life, a warm, peaceful one, in which there was a place for both peace and joy. I started to discover things that I really loved: drawing, handiwork, taking care of plants. I found hobbies that I felt confident in. And time passed. 14 years have passed. 14 years of silence from my parents and Daniel. No emails, no phone calls. Their numbers have changed. Their addresses were no longer known to me. Their faces gradually began to fade in my memory, like old photographs faded by the sun. And I walked on. My grandparents became my family. My life became a house where I was loved. I was building my future anew, on new, solid foundations. But one day, everything suddenly collapsed. It was early in the morning, and the sun hadn't even risen above the horizon yet. The house was shrouded in silence, broken only by the creaking of floorboards and the breathing of the sleepers. I was already awake, drinking tea, wrapped in a warm blanket, when a sharp, insistent knock on the door broke the calm like a bolt from the blue. The pounding was fierce, repetitive, the kind that chilled the skin. Grandma and Grandpa had already woken up and exchanged glances. And I froze. My heart started pounding so loudly that it seemed like it could be heard from outside. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know who was there. But I felt with my whole body that whatever was on the other side of the door would bring change. Large. Irreversible. I woke up, not immediately realizing where I was and why the air in the room seemed tense, as if before a thunderstorm that was about to burst through the windows. My body felt heavy, as if every movement required effort, and my mind was wrapped in a veil of sleepy confusion. And suddenly, through this inner fog, my grandfather's voice cut through, angry, determined, the way I had heard him only once, many years ago, when someone tried to offend our neighbor at the market. After leaving your daughter on the sidelines of life for more than a decade, what do you want now? He said, and there was so much hurt in his voice that my heart sank. I slowly got up and walked to the front door, still not understanding what exactly was waiting for me there. When I went out onto the veranda, my eyes involuntarily widened in surprise. In front of me stood the woman who gave birth to me, but at that moment she did not seem at all the one I once called Mom. Her face was gray and drawn, there were deep wrinkles on her forehead, and her lips were trembling, as if she was holding back some bitterness. A man was standing next to her, and although his figure seemed familiar, his father's former slimness had been replaced by a ponderous clumsiness, his stomach bulged above the belt, and his shoulders were slumped. They both looked like people who had been left behind by life, but not by lessons, but only by fatigue. They were smiling as if nothing had happened, as if 14 years of silence hadn't passed, as if I hadn't heard those words that burned my heart then, on the porch of this very house. They held out their hands to me, as if to demonstrate their benevolence, but I already felt my whole body tense, my muscles contract, and a voice inside warns, "Don't believe it." "If you're my parents," I said coldly, "then why are you acting like we're strangers? Why are you here now?" My mother tilted her head slightly to the side and replied with an unnatural sweetness in her voice, "We just came to talk. We heard that things are going very well here, especially the workshop. Your father, he's getting old, both as a master and as a manager. He's not pulling everything anymore. So we thought maybe we should go back and take over." The father added, nodding, "We also heard that our wonderful daughter is going to inherit the workshop. We think it should be our, well, family thing, you know." I felt my fists clench, but before I could respond, Grandpa snorted and stepped forward. His voice turned as cold as ice, penetrating into the very bone. "Oh, so that's it. Did you come back for the leftovers? To take something that wasn't even touched? Do you, amateurs who don't know anything about glass or business, want to run a workshop? Funny. We have already decided who will be our successor. This is Grace. She's a genius." The father recoiled, his face twisted in surprise and rejection. He grunted, "Genius? This girl? She can't do anything. We're talking about that useless, introverted." He didn't finish. Grandma, without saying a word, grabbed the newspaper that was lying on the bedside table by the door, and threw it so accurately into her father's chest that he flinched. "Open it, since you've already come. Finally, take a look at what you missed," she said, her finger pointing at the headline. My father unfolded the newspaper, scanned the article, and I saw his gaze change, first bewilderment, then shock, and finally something like an attempt to admit the obvious. There, on the page, there was an interview with me. "A young glass master from a local workshop is an inspiration to the world." I stood next to him, watching his reaction, and it was as if I was reliving the whole long road that had passed. When I was in high school, I started to take an interest in my grandfather's workshop. At first, she was just nearby, feeding tools, removing glass fragments, mixing paints. But every day my fascination became deeper. I fell in love with the magic of fused glass, the reflection of light, and the fragile beauty that could be created with my own hands. Grandpa noticed it. He began to teach me, to pass on knowledge, the secrets of the craft. I absorbed every word, every gesture, and it became part of my essence. A few years ago, I completed my first serious work, a glass panel in which I tried to capture the sunset over our field. We put it on display at the fair, and it caused a real delight. After that, there were orders, First local, then from other cities, then from abroad altogether. We opened a website and started selling products online. The workshop came to life and expanded. I became a master. My father silently lowered the newspaper. His face was pale. And suddenly he said, "You really are our daughter." His voice was trembling, not from remorse, but from a futile attempt to regain control. "You're not like, well, that useless, shy son," he added, as if saying it with relief. I blinked at him. Useless, timid. Echoed in my head. These words did not fit with the image of Daniel that was in my memory. He was their pride. He was the kind of star I couldn't even get close to. I turned to my mother, looking for some kind of confirmation or denial in her gaze. But she just looked away. She looked at me intently, fatigue and a strange excitement mixed in her gaze, as if she did not expect to say all this, but at the same time could not restrain herself. "Just listen to this useless Daniel," she began, her voice getting faster and higher. "He graduated from university, got a job at one of the best companies, everything went smoothly for him, but—" She hesitated for a second, but after all these years, when all they did was praise him as perfect, as a role model, he suddenly became so fragile. Any word is like a blow. Arrogant, annoyed, and then he just quit. In just 1 year. I felt as if the earth was shaking under me, as if someone had suddenly broken an old painting that had been hanging in your head all your life. "Now he sits in his room almost all the time," she continued. "He only goes to the bathroom or shower, and that's it. We had to leave our jobs because of him. It's hard for us, very hard." I listened and couldn't believe it. This image of a boy who was prayed for, who was proud of, who received everything, was being destroyed before our eyes. I had a new picture in front of me, an adult, a broken, lost man, and it didn't fit in my head that this was my brother. But before I could process all this, my father suddenly intervened, his voice sounding almost businesslike, as if he were continuing an old conversation. "Hey, Dad, forget about the workshop for a second. You have money, don't you? You can support us, right? Or at least the two of us." Grandpa froze, his gaze was heavy, as if he wanted to make sure that he had heard correctly. "Do the two of you only care about yourself? And now you've decided to forget about your useless son?" His voice became quieter, but there was steel in it. "Daniel is still young, he can find himself. But you? Are you adults, and after all, are you asking for help now? Listen to your son's request for your love," the father added with emphasis, as if these words in themselves meant something. Grandpa took a deep breath, his shoulders slumped slightly, and without saying a word, he turned around and walked back into the house. I remained rooted to the spot, not believing that all this was happening in reality. Mom turned to me, and her eyes were red-rimmed, tired, and bloodshot. "You should come live with us too, right?" she said, and there was a strange mix of command and desperation in her voice. "Oh, wait, don't you understand what we're talking about?" Her tone became dangerously cold, as if a curtain of ice was descending on me. "You just need to not go with them." My father nodded like an automaton, his expression blank, as if he hadn't heard what he was saying. I felt a chill spreading through my body, and my blood froze in my veins, just like on the scariest day of my childhood, when they left me on my doorstep and drove away. "Why should I live with strangers?" I asked, my voice trembling, but inside I could hear the hardness that had grown over the years of pain. Mom replied sharply, "We are your real parents. We raised you." And I looked at her, and everything that once connected us crumbled to dust. I didn't see my mother in front of me, but the woman who once said it would have been better if I hadn't been born. And next to me is my father, who left without looking back, not even hearing my tears. I was trying to figure out how they came back after all these years, and what they hoped to get, because I was forgotten by them, left as an unnecessary detail, and now they seem to have decided to just pick up where they left off. But I was no longer the kind of girl who could be pushed, shut up, taken away. I was a woman who grew up surrounded by love that they didn't even try to give. I no longer needed to accept them. I stood straight, my gaze was steady. "I do not know what you expected," I began, "but I am not the child you were pushing around. I don't remember any care or affection from you. All I remember is silence, screams, and how you drove away, leaving me alone. You haven't seen me. You didn't make me feel loved. My grandparents did it. My teachers did it. It was done by those who stayed by your side when you disappeared. I took a deep breath, but they were silent. Only the emptiness between us filled the space, and everything seemed impossible, to start again, to trust. You can legally be my parents, I said in a flat voice, but you are strangers to me. I don't remember you being parents. I can't live with strangers. The room froze. Neither mom nor dad said a word. And my grandparents, who were standing behind me, were also silent, but their silence was different. There was support in it. I felt them behind me like a solid wall. I knew they were close. The expression on my parents' faces, their prolonged silence, told me everything I needed to know. They were not on my side, as always. The father, clearly upset, looked at the grandfather and muttered, "Don't you think it's terrible, Dad? Say something." Grandpa smiled calmly, a stark contrast to his father's growing anger. He straightened his shoulders, and his voice sounded firm. "If you want me to say something too, it's weird to say it. You raised Grace, but you left her at 9. His father stammered, "No, not about me." "Say something, Grace. Tell Grandpa, tell her." He tried to help himself. Grandpa, as if not noticing the pressure, chuckled softly, "Don't leave us now," and the corner of his lips twitched with annoyance. My father tried to speak again. "Hey, Dad, that's enough." It slipped from me, but Grandpa interrupted him with a sharp voice that echoed through the room. "Why did you say such spoiled things?" And his words were final, like a verdict. There was an awkward silence in the room. The parents froze, as if the breath had been ripped from their lungs. Grandma hurried into the kitchen and returned with a large bag of salt. "It's perfect," she said in a flat voice. She started throwing salt in my mother's face. Mom screamed, "Oh, what is this? Is this salt?" Grandma calmly explained, "It's for cooking." Parents who abandon their children are the epitome of bad luck. Her every move was unhurried and deliberate as she continued, "Come back already." Her voice exploded with bitterness. "I'll throw salt until you leave. We have a lot of it, so be prepared." Grandpa stood nearby, holding a new bag of salt, and began throwing salt with force directly into both faces. "Hey, Dad, Mom, please stop." I shouted, but my grandparents didn't stop. Their faces shone with determination. "Come back already. Don't ever come back here," they screamed together, clutching my hand. Confused, they begged, "Are you going to leave your parents? We are drowning in debt. We are fighting for survival. Shouldn't the family be helping?" I abruptly pulled my hand away. My voice was flat and cold. "My family is just my grandparents." With one decisive movement, I took the bag of salt from my grandmother and poured all its contents on my parents. This act became my point of no return, a way to break the last invisible bonds. "Goodbye forever," I said, watching them recoil, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Without saying a word more, they ran out of the house, running away as if they had nothing left to hold. Over time, my brother appeared in the workshop. It turned out that the debt collectors were chasing them, and in the chaos they left, their debt led to Daniel simply being thrown out of the house, leaving him virtually penniless. The police took him away, and when they found out about him, they contacted his grandparents as the only relatives. Grandpa, with tired dignity, offered a solution. "If you don't work, you don't eat." He said, "If you work hard and help in the workshop, there is a place to stay and food here." To my surprise, my brother agreed without hesitation. Despite his lost ambitions, he accepted reality and stepped forward, ready to learn anew. He started working in the workshop, and although at first glance it seemed that he sincerely wanted to change, it was quite clear that he still lacked a lot: neither patience, nor concentration, nor the ability to hear criticism, nor, in the end, the desire to admit that everything he knew before was not here. It didn't matter. My grandfather was never a gentle mentor. He did not embellish reality, did not persuade, did not pat on the head. He scolded, sometimes sharply, spoke bluntly if the work was sloppy, forced him to redo, study, and look for mistakes. And although it was difficult at times, especially for Daniel, who was used to being a favorite, it was honest, and it was this leadership, firm but fair, that began to change my brother over time. Under the watchful eye of his grandfather, he gradually began to learn what real work is, in which there is no place for approval for empty efforts, in which you are appreciated not for your last name, but for what you did with your own hands. It was a new beginning for him, perhaps the most difficult, but also the most important. And although the changes don't come overnight, over time I started to notice how he was changing, at first, timidly, as if he himself did not believe that he was capable of more, then more confidently. He began to understand that perseverance bears fruit, that respect is earned not by words, but by deeds. At first, he was just a worker, clumsily and with difficulty trying to find his place among the glass and tools. But soon he found a gift in himself, not in craft, like me, but in those things that seemed far away to me. He understood sales, understood how numbers work, how to keep accounts, and thanks to him we were able to improve our online store, build a structure that was previously lame. His skills became important, and at some point he became indispensable. My brother, who seemed distant and alien to me as a child, began to look at his past from a different perspective. Remorse appeared in his eyes. He began to admit how unfairly he had treated me before, and, even without loud apologies, in his every act there was an attempt to return what had once been destroyed. It was a strange feeling to see him so changed, and to feel for him not resentment, but something like sympathy, and maybe hope. I cannot say that a complete reconciliation was immediately established between us. But he began to treat me kindly, with respect, which he had not had before. And even if this is just the beginning, it was already a step forward. Small, but significant. But as soon as it seemed that he had found his place and was recognized for his efforts, everything changed again. Our parents contacted him as if nothing had happened, as if all these years could have been erased with a single message. They wrote, "Daniel, where are you? What are you doing there? It's getting dangerous here. We might end up on a fishing boat. Please help us." Their words were extremely selfish, as always, no hint of remorse, no mention of what they had done to him, no attempt to understand who he had become. It was too much. He was silent for a long time, holding his phone in his hand, then calmly got up, changed all the numbers, deleted his accounts, and turned off his email. He broke all ties, and in that moment I saw strength in him. It was his way of making a point. Protect yourself. Finally. Sometimes I wonder if they really went to work on a fishing boat, as they said in the letter. Maybe. Or maybe it was just another manipulation. But I have no desire to find out the truth. Neither him nor me. We felt relieved. We no longer had to wait for a new invasion, new demands, new screams. We were able to focus on our own lives. Now the dining table in our house is surrounded by those who are really important. Those who walked the path with us, who did not give up when it was difficult. Maybe we don't have restaurant dishes, and sauce sometimes drips on the tablecloth, but on the other hand, there is always mashed potatoes made by my grandmother, tender as her touch, and slightly charred vegetables that my brother is learning to cook. My grandfather drinks his beer from a glass that I blew out with my own hands, and he smiles as we laugh at dinner. And for the first time, I feel like this is home. It's a family. It's a simple life. Very simple. But I've never had such a life. For the first time, I feel something I didn't know when I was a kid, happiness. Present. Without fear, without pain, without feeling like I'm a burden. I had a feeling of peace, soft, deep, almost incomprehensible. And all this is thanks to people who really love. Which are left. Who saw me when I didn't see myself. Who were accepted, no matter what. And I can finally say, I'm home.